What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue here with my 2024 college football schedule preview and projected record series. The North Carolina Tar Heels are up next before we preview their schedule for 2024 and give them an early projected record based on how tough their schedule is. Let's take a look back at what North Carolina did in 2023. Here were my projections and predictions last year for the Tar Heels. My projection had them at 9-3, and then my prediction for this team was 10-2. So I did have a little bit of a difference there with my projection and prediction for this team last year. But North Carolina was just under that compared to my projection and predictions for this team. North Carolina going 8-4 overall in 2023, but 8-5 overall if you count their bowl game loss at the end of the year. So the Tar Heels are coming off a pretty big disappointing season last year in 2023. I think a lot of people predicted this team to make it to the ACC Championship last year. I did predict this team to probably finish like third or fourth in the middle of the pack in the ACC, but not to the ACC Championship last year. Here was the schedule in the regular season in 2023. You look at their non-conference schedule, had a very tough non-conference schedule with South Carolina and Minnesota, two Power 5 teams, and then also you had Appalachian State out of the Sun Belt, not a very bad group of 5 team. They went into overtime in that game back on September the 9th, and then you look at the other non-conference game in Campbell. That was the only easy non-conference game on this schedule for the Tar Heels. So they had a very tough non-conference schedule, but they were able to win all their non-conference games, and then this team started out undefeated until they suffered their first losses of the season to Virginia and Georgia Tech here. As we take a look at the 4 losses from last year, of course they lost to Virginia here and Georgia Tech here in the month of October, and then they lost to to Clemson and NC State both here on the road in back-to-back weeks in the month of November. So that's the schedule from last year for North Carolina. Let's now look ahead to the schedule for 2024. Here is that schedule for the Tar Heels. Before we go game by game, let's take a look at who they will play in the non-conference this upcoming season. So this is their non-conference schedule. They will, of course, play Minnesota here in a rematch from last year, and this time it will be in week 1 instead of week number 3. Last year's game was in week number 3, but this time North Carolina will be playing them in week number 1. It will be on the road here, and this game is going to be on a weeknight. Supposedly it's going to be on a weeknight game, and it's going to be on a Thursday. So they will play on the road at Minnesota here at a very tough road game. And then, of course, you look at the rest of their non-conference games. Charlotte, NC Central, and James Madison. Not a very tough non-conference schedule compared to last year's non-conference schedule, but James Madison is not a bad group of 5 team either, so that's a game you don't want to sleep on if you're a North Carolina fan. But that's the North Carolina Tar Heels' non-conference schedule for 2024. Let's now go back to the schedule here for the upcoming season and go game by game now for North Carolina. So again, they will start things off with Minnesota here on the road on August 29th. Again, this game is going to be on a Thursday. And again, they do play them in a rematch, and this time it will be on the road here at Minnesota. And then they play Charlotte after that here on September the 7th, NC Central on September the 14th. And then they get James Madison also here at home on September 21st. So North Carolina will play all 4 of their non-conference games to kick off the season, and then they open up ACC play here on the road against Duke on September the 28th. And then they get to the month of October. They'll play Pittsburgh here at home on October 5th. And then they play Georgia Tech here at home on October the 12th. Then they get their first bye week here in the month of October. And then they come out of the bye week. They'll play Virginia here on the road on October 26th, the team that beat them, of course, last year. And then they get to the month of November. They'll play Florida State here on the road on November 2nd. So you got back-to-back road games here with Virginia and Florida State that are not going to be pretty easy. I mean, Virginia obviously beat North Carolina last year, so I don't think that's really going to be an easy game for the Tar Heels. But, they should be overall still the better roster. And then the Tar Heels get another bye week here. Their second bye week comes here in the second weekend of the month of November. They come out of the bye week, play Wake Forest here at home on November 16th. Then they go on the road to face Boston College here on the road on November 23rd. And then they close things out with a rivalry game against North Carolina State here on November 30th. So that's the schedule for the Tar Heels in 2024. Not a bad schedule for North Carolina. You don't have to play Clemson on this schedule. You don't have to play Miami. And also you don't have to play Louisville on this schedule, which is the good news. But you still have to play Florida State here on the road, which will definitely be a very tough road game. I think that's definitely their toughest road game here on this ACC schedule. And then, of course, that non-conference game on the road at Minnesota. But again, not a very tough schedule at all for North Carolina in 2024. Let's now get a projection projection here for the Tar Heels based on this schedule. And again, this is not an official prediction. This is simply a projection based on how tough that schedule is. And this is the scale I use here for my projections. If it's a 1% game in the red, those games are counted as automatic losses, and that percentage in that red. 20% games in the orange are going to be games where North Carolina will be about a couple touchdowns of underdogs. 40% games in the yellow are going to be games where there'll be a heavy underdog in by about a touchdown there in the yellow. 50-50 games will be in the white. Games I think can go either way. 60% games in the purple are going to be games where the Tar Heels will be favored by at least a touchdown. And then the 80% games here in the blue, they're going to be favored by at least a couple touchdowns and also by double digits. And then the 99% games here in the green, these are going to be counted as the automatic wins here for North Carolina. So we'll start with the green games here, the games at 99% here. We'll start with this percentage here first for this projection for North Carolina. So let's start with the green games here, the games where North Carolina will be favored by more than 3 touchdowns here in the green. And I got 3 of them on here for the Tar Heels. I got Charlotte, NC Central, and James Madison here. 3 out of their 4 non-conference games, I think they'll be favored by at least by more than 3 touchdowns. Charlotte and NC Central, I definitely think they're over 95%, but James Madison is definitely a 90% game in my opinion. Last year, when I did a projection for North Carolina on their schedule from last season, I did say that Appalachian State was a 90% game that North Carolina will be favored in that percentage, just because the Mountaineers are a pretty good group of 5 team. And same thing with James Madison here. James Madison had a pretty good season last year, so this is a game that you definitely don't want to sleep on. It's not an automatic win, but it's not a guaranteed win either, but we count them as wins here when they are in the green here for our projections. But all 3 of these games, I think North Carolina will be favored by more than 3 touchdowns. But like I said, that James Madison game is definitely a 90% game in my opinion. So all 3 of these games, you can count them as automatic wins. Again, they're not guaranteed wins, but we count them as automatic wins here in these projections. So let's now go to the next percentage, the games where North Carolina will be favored by a couple touchdowns and also by double digits here in the blue. And I got a couple of them on this schedule for North Carolina. Virginia and Wake Forest, I think North Carolina will be favored in both of these games by at least a couple of touchdowns. Virginia beat North Carolina last year. That's the reason why I'm putting this game in the blue. And because it's on the road, I know this game should be in the purple. Virginia also should get credit for being like a heavy underdog against North Carolina. But let's be honest, North Carolina has the more talented roster. I don't know how good I expect Virginia to be this year, and also the same thing with Wake Forest. And plus, North Carolina is playing Wake Forest at home, so I don't know how good that team is going to be either. And like I said, Virginia is a blue game just because it's on the road. And it's also definitely a trap game in my opinion, just because, North Carolina got beat by them last year. But like I said, I don't know how good both of these teams are going to be here that you're seeing in the blue. Again, Virginia and Wake Forest are 2 teams with a lot of question marks. They just don't have the talent on the roster. But both of these games, I think you can favor the Tar Heels by at least a couple touchdowns and also by double digits. Let's go to the next percentage now here in the purple at 60%. The games where North Carolina will be favored by at least a touchdown. And I got a couple of them on this schedule as well. Pittsburgh and Boston College on the road. I think North Carolina will be favorites in both of these games by at least a touchdown. They're not guaranteed wins. They're also not automatic wins either. These are games where, North Carolina's going to have like a trap game and everything. And you definitely don't want to sleep on these 2 games if you're a North Carolina fan as well. Pittsburgh, I know they weren't really great last year. If this game was on the road at Pittsburgh, I would definitely make it a 50-50 game. I think Pittsburgh will be a little bit better this year. I do kind of expect them to turn things around. That's a program that is really consistent sometimes, and sometimes they're inconsistent. They were definitely inconsistent last year. Boston College, just because it's on the road, that's definitely a purple game in my opinion. Boston College was a pretty average team last year. They did make it to a bowl game, but not enough for me to make this a 50-50 game because North Carolina is the more talented roster. So I think both of these games you can favor the Tar Heels by at least a touchdown in both of these games in the purple. And like I said, they're not going to be easy games here in the purple. These are like trap games here for the Tar Heels. And then the rest of the games that you're seeing here in the white, the 5 games here in the white, Minnesota, Duke, Georgia Tech, Florida State, and then NC State. These are all 50-50 games here for North Carolina that I think can go either way. Minnesota, that's a big non-conference game to kick off the year. Last year's game was a defensive battle. We'll see if this same kind of game happens this year. Kind of hope not, though. I'd like to see more scoring in both of these teams. But again, Minnesota really couldn't move the football in this Tar Heel defense last year. And then Duke, that's a rivalry game. You never know what can happen. Georgia Tech was a team that beat North Carolina last year, and that's the reason why this is a 50-50 game. Georgia Tech is a program that seems like it's heading in the right direction now. I'm not saying they're going to be a really good team this year, but it seems like their program is heading back in the right direction. And then Florida State here on the road, I think both of these teams are pretty even in roster-wise. And then North Carolina State, this is a rivalry game, kind of like Duke. It's a rivalry game. You never know what can happen. And the Tar Heels have lost to the Wolfpack, in the last couple years, so we'll see if they can finally end that winning streak. And plus, they do get the game here at home. And they also get Georgia Tech at home, which they did lose to Georgia Tech last year on the road. So I think all these 50-50 games can go either way, and I think these are all definitely very winnable games here in the 50-50 range as well. Let's now get a projected record here for the North Carolina Tar Heels for 2024. And like I said, this is not an official prediction. This is simply a projection based on how tough the schedule is. So we count those 3 green games as automatic wins, then you count the blue games as slight wins as well, and then you average out these 2 purple games here at 60%, and then you average out all 5 of these 50-50 games at 50%, and the overall projected record that you get for North Carolina is 9-3 here for 2024. So the same projection as last year for me for North Carolina this season. I think this is a top 25 team this year. Not saying they're going to be better than they were from last season, especially on the offensive side of the football. Drake May, of course, will be gone. They're going to have a new quarterback. But defensively, we kind of expect some improvements there on the defensive side of the football for North Carolina. That's going to be the main goal, and it's also going to come down to the quarterback position. But can North Carolina be like a dark horse contender in the ACC this year and possibly make a run for a college football playoff spot? It really wouldn't shock me if North Carolina did that. But again, 9-3 projection is what comes out to be here for the Tar Heels for 2024. Again, based on this schedule, and like I said, it's not really just about the overall record, and it's not really just about the wins and also who the favorite is. It's really just about how tough the schedule is. So again, 9-3 is my projection here for North Carolina. Worst case scenario, I think, would definitely have to be 8-4 or 7-5. Best case would definitely be like 9-3 or maybe like 10-2. It would really shock me if this team did go 11-1, maybe 10-2 as well. But again, 9-3 is my projection here for the Tar Heels for 2024. Give me your thoughts on this North Carolina team down in the comments below. What do you think their projected record is for 2024? Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports Channel.